Heritage Park, located just inside the front gate of historic Little Rock Air Force Base, Arkansas, is a 3/4 of a mile paved walking trail featuring 9 static display U.S. Air Force and Little Rock Air Force Base aircraft. This is Heritage Park. The first stop is at the HH-1H Iroquois Helicopter. This helicopter was used by the Air Force for rescue and recovery and for the transportation of equipment and personnel. The HH-1H was active from 1973 to 1995 and used by Little Rock Air Force Base from 1979 to 1986. Next stop, the Boeing B-47E Stratojet, the world's first swept-wing all-jet bomber. This bomber served our Air Force from 1951 to the late 1960s. This memorial, marked by flags of the Air Force, State of Arkansas, and the POW-MIA flag, was dedicated in 1980 to the courageous airmen assigned to Little Rock Air Force Base who lost their lives in aircraft and missile mishaps while serving their country. The C-119G Flying Boxcar carried cargo, personnel, litter patients, mechanized equipment, and airdropped cargo and paratroopers. The Flying Boxcar, activated in November of 1958, was used extensively in the Korean and Vietnam Wars. Next, the Douglas C-47 Skytrain was the workhorse airlifter of the Second World War. The first flight came just 2 weeks after the bombing of Pearl Harbor. By the end of the war, more than 15,000 C-47s had been built. This Global War on Terrorism memorial is dedicated to the airmen of Little Rock Air Force Base who were killed in action fighting global terrorism in the name of freedom and justice. The names of Staff Sergeant Dustin Peters and Staff Sergeant John Self grace the sides of this Battlefield Cross Memorial. Development of the unarmed RF-101C began in 1956. It was the world's first supersonic photo reconnaissance aircraft. The RF-101C had 4 cameras on board, including panorama, forward oblique, and a split vertical camera. The B-57C Canberra was delivered to the Air Force from Baltimore, Maryland in July of 1955. It was initially used in a training role, but in 1958, it was transferred to the Arkansas Air National Guard and converted for use in a tactical reconnaissance role. The B-57C retired from military service in 1978. This C-130E was the 663rd Hercules manufactured by Lockheed Aircraft and was delivered to the Air Force in June of 1962. After nearly 40 years of active duty service, this Hercules was retired and placed on static display at the home of the Herc in June of 2003. This C-123K Provider, which entered active duty in 1957, was initially manufactured as a C-123B. It was converted to a C-123K in 1967 and was briefly used in operational airlift. The Provider transferred to the U.S. Air Force Reserves and was retired in 1981. Finally, our tour finishes with the B-58 Hustler, the world's first supersonic bomber. The Hustler held 19 world records and 6 aviation trophies. Little Rock Air Force Base was home to the B-58 Hustler mission from 1965 to 1970. Anyone with a valid military ID can sponsor a group onto Little Rock Air Force Base to tour Heritage Park. To sponsor a group, the ID holder must collect the following information for purposes of a background check. Full name exactly as it appears on the driver's license or state ID for every person in the tour group who is 18 years or older, and the driver's license or state ID number and state of issue for those over 18, and everyone's date of birth. This information must be provided to 19aw.paall@us.af.mil no later than 5 duty days prior to the tour date. Who knows, while touring the static displays of Heritage Park, you might just see a current C-130 overhead.